At 91, Sir Michael Caine finally broke the promise he once made over a late-night pint and opened the last secret file on Sean Connery. One slow sip of tea, a gravelly sigh, and he drops the line that sends the internet scrambling. Sean wasn't the man you saw on screen. In that instant, the world's coolest spy turns into a riddle. Was the eyebrow-raising charmer really a prisoner of his own success? Did the handshake that impressed kings also hide a fist full of anger? And what pushed the biggest box office hero of the 1960s to flee to the Bahamas and swear he'd never shoot another frame? To grasp the grenade Caine just rolled across the red carpet, we have to rewind to the smoke-stained stairwells of post-war Edinburgh, where a lanky milk runner named Thomas Sean Connery learned to fight for every scrap.
Yes. You enjoyed that, didn't you?
Yeah. It's because of my relationship with Sean and John Huston, the director.
That's right.
We had a wonderful time.
Zip forward 15 years and that same kid, hardened by bodybuilding and sheer grit, steps into Dr. No, lifts an eyebrow and murmurs, "Bond, James Bond." The planet melts, money pours in. Photographers camp outside his door. Yet behind closed doors, Caine watches his friend pace the floor like a caged panther, muttering that the sharp suit feels more like handcuffs every day. For decades, Caine kept those midnight confessions sealed, loyal to a man who hated pity almost as much as he hated lazy directors. But time sharpens memory and loosens lips. Now, he spills everything. The audition Connery nearly missed because he was helping a mate move furniture. The Playboy quote that chased him for half a century.
Do you work for the tabloids or the News of the World?
Not at all. I just said there are
National Enquirer? Are you wearing a jockstrap or what?
I'm not tonight, sir. No.
Okay. That's why you're smiling.
I haven't.
And the disastrous film set that made him brand Hollywood a nest of idiots and bolt for good. Along the way, we'll uncover secret diary pages, silent acts of charity, and the quiet hobby Connery called My Real Escape. Think you know the legend behind the Bond pistol? Think again. Because once you learn why Connery walked away from multi-million-dollar sequels and swapped studio spotlights for ocean breezes, you may decide fame is less a gift and more a ticking gadget that always goes off. Stay with me, because what Sir Michael just revealed booms louder than any Bond theme. And when the smoke clears, you'll never look at 007 or the man who birthed him the same way again. Fountain Bridge, Edinburgh, looked nothing like a future movie set. Soot streaked the walls, ration lines snaked around corners, and a skinny paperboy named Thomas Sean Connery hauled milk crates at dawn just to keep coins in his pocket. His mum cleaned houses. His dad hauled cement bags off lorries until his back screamed. By 12, the boy shot past 6 feet, earning the nickname Big Tam. But he still slept on the same threadbare couch and washed with cold water that smelled of coal dust. School felt useless. The real lessons were grit and timing. How to sprint across cobblestones without spilling a single bottle. How to duck a drunk swinging arm on payday. How to stay proud when your shoes leaked rain. At 16, he joined the Royal Navy, hoping the sea would pay better than the streets. It didn't. Stomach ulcers cut him loose after 3 hard years. But the service left 2 lasting marks. One tattoo for mum and dad, another that read Scotland Forever. Back in Edinburgh, short on choices, he pounded iron in a basement gym lit by a single flickering bulb. Bodybuilding contests followed, nothing glamorous, just sweat, cheap tanning oil, and a judge's nod that sometimes meant grocery money. One weekend in London, a fellow lifter tipped him about open auditions for South Pacific. Connery shrugged, cued, and landed a chorus boy part because no one could miss a 6'2" Scot with a grin wider than the stage. On that tour, he bunked with a quick-witted Londoner named Maurice Micklewhite, soon to rebrand himself Michael Caine. They swapped stories of empty fridges, shared cigarettes, and vowed that if either one made it, he'd drag the other along. Those ramshackle dressing rooms taught Connery to project his voice past cheap curtains and ignore hecklers who called his accent too rough. More small parts came. 6 pounds a week here, 10 shillings babysitting there. He memorized street grids from his milk route, impressed cabbies by naming every corner, and lugged scenery between scenes to earn overtime. Nothing about those years hinted he'd soon redefine cinematic cool. Yet each rejection toughened the hide. Each late-night pub chat with Caine sharpened the dream. Big Tam was building armor, not muscles. A resilience that would matter when Hollywood finally tapped his shoulder. And that tap almost never happened, because one rainy morning, a moving van and a friend in need nearly cost him the audition of a lifetime. Rain hammered London like it wanted to drown every dream in the city, and Sean Connery stood under a dripping awning, debating whether to keep lugging a friend's wardrobe up 3 flights of stairs or sprint across town for a casting call he knew nothing about. The job was for a low-budget spy film titled Dr. No. No big stars attached, no flashy paycheck, and the producer's note simply read, "Must look dangerous in a tux." Connery glanced at the sky, cursed the downpour, then tossed the last box inside and bolted for the tube. By the time he reached Pinewood Studios, his suit was soaked, his hair a mess, and security almost turned him away for looking too rough. Inside, the atmosphere felt worse. Studio brass whispered that the role should go to an English gentleman, maybe a polished actor like Cary Grant. Dana Broccoli, wife of producer Albert Cubby Broccoli, watched the chatter, then caught Connery stalking across the lobby, shoulders rolling like a panther that hadn't eaten. "That's Bond," she whispered, and the remark would change movie history. Still, Sean had to win over author Ian Fleming, who thought the Scot's build and accent clashed with his suave super spy. Connery didn't waste breath defending himself. He simply leaned back, lit a cigarette, and let the silence challenge every man in the room. When he left, one executive muttered, "He moves like a jungle cat." The part was his. The next weeks were boot camp. Director Terrence Young dragged him to tailors, casinos, and restaurants, drilling posture, fork angles, and the perfect pause before Bond, James Bond. Connery soaked it up like whiskey and oak. He knew this was his shot to leave chorus lines and milk roots behind forever. On set, he learned to throw a punch that looked lethal, then flash a grin that disarmed everyone watching. The camera loved the contradiction. When Dr. No premiered in 1962, the world gasped. Critics hailed a new kind of hero, half gentleman, half street fighter. Box office numbers exploded, and Connery's monthly fan mail jumped from a handful to thousands. Yet the greatest measure came from Fleming himself. After seeing the film, he rewrote Bond's backstory, giving the spy a Scottish father in tribute to the actor who had just redefined him. Connery walked into that premiere wearing an immaculate dinner jacket, but inside he still felt the cold of Edinburgh pavements and the sting of Navy failure. Fame was intoxicating, sure, but it also rang like a starting bell, because even as champagne popped around him, he sensed the trap closing, the possibility that this single role might cage him forever. Box office gold poured in after Dr. No, but with every ticket sold, the handcuffs tightened. Sean couldn't step outside a hotel without flashbulbs popping like fireworks, or sit for coffee without strangers leaning in to hear him say that famous line. At first, the attention felt like winning the lottery. Free suits, first-class flights, a London flat with a view of the Thames. But the shine faded fast. Reporters no longer asked about his next role. They only wanted Bond gossip. Was the gun real? Do you keep the tux? He felt the question scrape at his skin, turning the man into a souvenir. In studio meetings, executives called him 007 by accident, then laughed as if it were harmless. Sean didn't laugh. He had trained for months to stretch beyond the tux. Shakespeare in regional theater, a gritty Irish boxer on stage. Yet every door swung back to the spy. That's when the 3 a.m. calls to Michael Caine started. Sean would whisper from a hotel balcony in Tokyo or Paris, miles from home, saying the tux felt heavier each day. Caine, grounded in his own rising career, listened more than he spoke. Both men had climbed from working-class streets. Both knew how easy it was to lose yourself when the money starts shouting louder than your own voice. Caine reminded him of those freezing dressing rooms during South Pacific, when they dreamt of nothing grander than a hot meal and a full audience. You wanted respect, not worship, Caine would say. Don't let them lock you in a glass case. But Hollywood wanted its franchise machine oiled and ready. The studio added clauses, demanding sequel after sequel, each one bigger and riskier. Sean watched peers win awards for roles that stretched them. Peter O'Toole in Lawrence, Paul Newman in HUD, while he repeated the same catchphrase, the same suave grin. Even the pay raises felt like hush money. When he negotiated for a percentage of the grosses instead of a flat fee, the suits balked, treating him like a hired prop. That insult cut deeper than any tabloid headline. Between shoots, he took roles that screamed the opposite of Bond. A disfigured soldier in The Hill, a desperate drifter in the Molly Maguires. And critics praised the raw performances. Yet, premieres still opened with the theme from Dr. No blaring over loudspeakers. Crowds cheered, then asked him to order a martini. No escape. One night after a charity gala, he snapped, telling a friend the tux felt stitched from barbed wire. That confession never made print, but it fueled a choice brewing inside him. Either own the spy forever, or break the mold before it broke him. Hollywood builds legends fast, but it can tear them down with a single sentence. For Sean Connery, that sentence came in 1965, buried near the back of a Playboy interview most fans never finished. Asked about handling relationship fights, he said there were times a man might raise a hand if every other option failed. The line felt careless, almost offhand. Connery probably forgot it by lunch. But print lasts longer than regret. Activists clipped it. Critics pounced. And the words started trailing him from press junkets to red carpet walks like a bad smell he could never wash off. 2 decades later, Barbara Walters reopened the wound on live television. Connery, now gray at the temples but still bulletproof in the public eye, doubled down instead of backing away. Viewers froze. Was their suave hero really defending violence? Fan clubs split overnight. Some excused it as old-school thinking. Others dumped their 007 posters in the bin. Studios panicked, drafting crisis statements that said plenty without saying sorry. Meanwhile, Michael Caine watched his friend's phone light up at 3 a.m. again. Only this time, it wasn't paparazzi outside. It was the echo of his own voice, rebounding in headlines he couldn't outrun. Then came 1993, and a glossy magazine spread that should have celebrated Connery's veteran status. Instead, the interviewer poked the same bruise, and Sean, stubborn as ever, tried to justify his stance as if the world hadn't moved on. Social attitudes were shifting fast. Movie heroes were turning into role model brand ambassadors, and tolerance for outdated views was collapsing. Each time Connery spoke, the backlash grew louder, feeding fresh news cycles that painted him as the dinosaur who didn't know the meteor had already landed. The controversy spilled into his private life. Ex-wife Diane Salento released a memoir hinting at dark moments behind closed doors. Connery denied mistreatment, insisting his words were twisted. Yet public opinion had reached critical mass. Protesters picketed premieres, tabloids mixed fact with rumor, and suddenly every journalist's first question wasn't about Bond gadgets but about that decades-old quote. The actor who once felt caged by a fictional character now found himself trapped by his own tongue. Friends begged him to issue a clear apology, but Connery hated being cornered. Instead, he retreated. First to golf courses where reporters couldn't follow, then to the Bahamas where neighbors cared more about tide charts than tabloid chatter. Still, the storm kept rolling across the ocean, reminding him that fame stores every misstep in high definition. Every legend reaches a moment when the spotlight feels hotter than the fire that forged it, and for Sean Connery, that moment arrived on the fog-choked backlot of the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen in 2002. The project looked safe on paper. Victorian superheroes, lavish sets in Prague, and a paycheck bigger than the first 3 Bond films combined. Connery, now in his early 70s, agreed partly for the adventure, and partly, friends say, because he still craved one last role that wasn't stamped 007. He stepped onto the soundstage expecting old-school teamwork. What he found felt more like a carnival ride run by people who'd lost the manual. Director Stephen Norrington came from special effects movies, not classical drama. He tore through schedules, shouted instructions nobody understood, then vanished to tinker with CGI while actors stood around in full costume, steam rising from their collars. Connery tried diplomacy at first. Quiet chats, gentle fixes. But weeks of chaos turned him raw. Crew members remember him pacing the floor, fist closed around a script he called half-cooked, muttering that the film needed a general, not a gambler. One afternoon, a stunt rig failed, sending sparks across the set. No one was hurt, but Connery erupted. He marched to Norrington's monitor, slammed his palm on the desk, and demanded tighter control. The director barked back, tempers blew, and studio reps had to separate them. Rumors spread that Connery wanted Norrington fired. Norrington allegedly called the star impossible. Whatever the exact words, the trust was gone. The shoot overran, budgets ballooned, and the studio yanked marketing money just to stop the bleeding. When League finally hit cinemas, critics shredded it. CGI looked rubbery, the plot meandered, and audiences who'd shown up for Connery walked out muttering that even Bond couldn't save this mess. The film still turned a profit overseas, but for Sean it felt like being booed off a stage he'd once ruled. In interviews, he didn't bother with tact. Hollywood, he said, was now run by idiots chasing sequels and easy cash. The blunt verdict landed harder than any review. It was a knighted actor's public resignation letter. Back home, he glanced at new scripts and pushed them aside. No rewrite could fix an industry he felt had swapped craft for spreadsheets. So he closed the door on 60 movies, cashed the checks he'd already earned, and told friends he was done serving a machine that's forgotten the art. When the last studio door slammed shut, Sean Connery didn't chase awards, comeback deals, or farewell tours. He booked a one-way flight to Lyford Cay, a gated corner of the Bahamas where seagrass bends in warm trade winds and nobody cares how many zeros sit on your royalty check. The island gave him something Hollywood never could: silence. There were no producers calling at dawn, no red carpet flashbulbs ricocheting in his eyes. Only the whir of ceiling fans, the crack of a golf ball, and gulls cackling over turquoise water. Golf was his morning ritual. Painting became his secret refuge. He cleared a sunlit loft above the garage, lined canvases like soldiers, and mixed oils in jam jars. Friends who visited found landscapes of Scottish highlands blooming beside Bahamian seascapes, two worlds stitched together by memory. He never signed them. For myself, he'd shrug, dabbing a stormy sky with the tenderness he once reserved for line readings. The man who spent decades under studio lights finally found a way to create without judges, critics, or weekend grosses. Yet even paradise couldn't wall off time. In his mid-80s, Connery started losing track of dates, then names, then the story thread of a conversation. Alzheimer's crept in quietly, stealing short-term memories first, leaving old movie lines strangely intact. On good days, he'd quote Goldfinger to make his wife Micheline laugh. On hard days, she'd guide him back indoors before dusk confused him. She refused outside nurses, guarding his dignity the way he once guarded her from paparazzi. Michael Caine called every Sunday. Sometimes Sean recognized the voice, sometimes not, but the rhythm stayed. If Sean drifted, Caine filled the gaps with football scores, silly jokes, the price of fish and chips in London. Anything that felt normal. After each call, Caine hung up, sat still, and let the silence hit. "That's what loyalty sounds like," he'd later say. Connery's island life wasn't all fading light. He loved barefoot walks at dawn, tracing the shoreline while waves erased his footprints. He'd pause, squint at the horizon, and whisper lines of poetry no one else could hear. Locals knew him only as the tall Scotsman who tipped well and laughed at stray dogs chasing sand crabs. Fame had become a souvenir he kept in a drawer, next to old Royal Navy badges and a folded note from his mum. But time, like tide, never stops. On the night of October 30th, 2020, the sea was calm, the easel sat clean, and Micheline read to him until his breathing slowed to a gentle, even hush. By dawn, the world would wake to headlines, but in that quiet room, the legend simply exhaled. News of Sean Connery's passing tore through dawn like a sudden thunderclap. Before most people finished pouring their first coffee, phones buzzed with alerts. Original 007 dies at 90. Social feeds flooded in real time. Daniel Craig called him the shadow under every tux we wear. Roger Moore's family posted a photo of two Bonds laughing on set, followed by a single line, "Good night, Big Brother." Even Harrison Ford, not known for flowery praise, wrote that sharing the screen with Connery in The Last Crusade felt like playing catch with the sun. Scotland paused. The Saltire flag on Edinburgh Castle dropped to half-mast, and back in Fountainbridge, locals left milk bottles wrapped in tartan ribbon on the old tenement site where Big Tam once delivered. The Bahamas Golf Club flew St. Andrew's Cross beside its palm trees. Newspapers from Tokyo to Toronto printed the same black and white portrait. Connery mid-stride, eyebrow cocked, somehow making a sidewalk look like a red carpet. Yet the most personal words came from Michael Caine. In a shaky radio call-in, he thanked his best mate for teaching him that real status isn't the car you drive, but the promises you keep. He recounted the Sunday calls, the bad jokes about aging knees, the vow they made in a cramped South Pacific dressing room to stay normal no matter how weird life gets. His voice cracked once, but he pushed on, saying Sean's true legacy was not Bond or box office, but the idea that a kid from a rough street could set the bar for global cool and still phone a friend to ask, "How's the family?" Film critics hurried to rank the performances. Was it the icy precision of From Russia with Love, the raw pain in The Hill, or the fatherly warmth opposite Ford? Twitter argued for days. But Micheline, alone in their island home, pinned a handwritten note on the gate. Sean believed art should speak louder than scandal. Please remember his smile. The line went viral, shared by millions who had never seen her handwriting before. In the weeks that followed, Bond marathons jammed streaming servers. Vintage interviews resurfaced, showing both the swagger and the stubbornness. Think pieces debated his controversial remarks versus his charity work, his fierce privacy versus his public persona. The verdict landed somewhere in the middle, as truth often does. A brilliant actor, deeply flawed, fiercely loyal, unforgettable. And that leaves us here. Was Connery a flawless hero? No. A trailblazer who redrew the map for every action star after him? Absolutely. His life reminds us that legends are human, success is double-edged, and walking away can be the bravest move of all. So tell us, what part of Sean Connery's story surprised you most? Drop your thoughts below. Tap like if this journey kept you hooked, and hit subscribe because our next deep dive uncovers another icon who chose exile over the spotlight. And the reason may shock you. Stick around. The reel is far from over.